Okay, welcome everybody to this chat with myself and Rob. And today we're talking about the multidimensional nature of the soul. So if you're listening to this on or watching us on YouTube, welcome along. Please hit the bell and subscribe for more insights and information if you enjoy it. If you're on a podcast, then we hope you enjoy it. It's probably going to be about maybe 40 minutes, something like that to get into it. So how are you, Rob? Welcome.
Good, and welcome everybody else out there in the world. Yes, I mean, I think this is an interesting subject. We always have interesting subjects. And so what are we going to talk about today?
So we're going to, I'm just going to recap of where we've been in the two videos that we've done so far, and then we're going to jump into. So what we're going to move into is the nature of the soul. So what do we mean in terms of soul? How does that fit into the work, or the version of reality that we're exploring? So in the first video, and what I'll do is, if you're on YouTube or if you're listening to someone, I will link up the other videos below or around this video, wherever, or audio, wherever it is. So if you're on YouTube, just check in the comments section. So the first one, we looked at how we create our own reality, how this is a state of consciousness and not a physical place, and how our beliefs create the environment. So it's a deeper version, if you like, of the law of attraction concepts that people will be familiar with. And that led on to this idea of looking at how we experience our own reality, which then led on to this idea of multiple realities. So that's kind of how it's been led through, if you like. And the next video, we looked at the nature of time and how time actually doesn't exist. That's very literal terms, but it doesn't exist, that here time and we experience events, but that time and events are not the same thing. So just because we experience events doesn't mean we experience time, which is a bit of a mind blower. But because of that, and because we create our own reality, and every thought and action creates another reality, that all events are happening simultaneously. That they're all versions of us and each other and all that. So that's where we ventured into this idea of the multiverse, the simultaneous multiverse, and what that means in this new kind of model of consciousness. So that brings us on to the nature of, well, what does that mean about the soul? So who are we? That's where we're at, I think. Would you think that's a fair recap?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. It's obviously going out on spurs and tangents, me particularly, but that always gives us a topic or subject for future podcasts, future talks. But yes.
Excellent. Okay, so this one is the nature of the multidimensional soul, and so we're going to have a look at the old version of the soul, of what we've been brought up with, or what various religions or belief systems and those versions, and then we're going to kind of have a look at the new version based on what we've been exploring. So do you want to jump into the old versions of the soul that there are?
Yes, I'll have a go at it. Yes, well, I think the old version of what the soul is it's something that is a bit illusory for people that, like us, who are in physical reality. It's something that I suppose, for example, in Buddhism, there's reincarnation and there's this idea of nirvana. Right. So the soul has a physical life, if it does good deeds in that life, it'll be reincarnated as a so-called higher level. If it does, if you do bad things, so-called bad things, then you'll be reincarnated. I mean, when I was working with the Tibetans in exile on a film, I discovered a lot more about Tibetan Buddhism. And apparently, if you've been a so-called a bad monk, you can end up as a dog. And there were a load of dogs roaming around where I was filming, and everyone was always feeding them. And it was always because, they believed that these were fallen monks, So with ideas like that, you have a lot of feeling that you're going to be punished if you don't behave properly, and it's a great inhibitor of expansion, basically. So you've got that. You've got the Christian idea of heaven and hell. Yeah. So yet again, if you aren't a particularly great person, you also come into life. Certainly, if you're a Catholic. Believing.
If you're a Catholic, I was going to say yes. If you're a Catholic, you're behind the line before you even start.
Well, I know, because I mean you have the original sin to cope with.
Yes.
So I mean, the sense of having to make up for being this sort of flawed individual, and if you manage to struggle through life and do all of the various rituals that are required, then if you're lucky, you're going to go to heaven, and if you're not so lucky, you're going to end up in hell, which is a deeply scary and incredible idea that somehow there is a God who is basically, going to mete out either good things or bad things, and that you are at the mercy of this wrathful God. And I mean, you think about Islam, you think about Judaism, you think about all of the world religions. There's a whole component about that basically disempowers the individual. So I think that's a rough resume of
perfect. Yeah, exactly. And I think I did actually know somebody who was Catholic, a lady who was Catholic, and one of them, it was such a struggle for her that she ended up being excommunicated. She had to do that in order to kind of free herself from the situation where she was just told that she was wrong. I like the word flawed. That in that particular belief system, that you are flawed by conception. And that's a very, very, very hard life to live. Then if you think about those things. So I'm going to just round up where the old version in a few things. So there is this idea in many religions, as you say, that you go along on the planet, and if you're good, when you go up to heaven or nirvana or where, normally it's up. This idea is up, isn't it? That you're up. And the new age idea is that the soul ascends. That's the new version, isn't it? That type of thing. So that you go up somewhere, that you're judged. If you haven't done very well, you get thwacked down to hell or wherever it is, punished in some way, shape, or form. That there's transmigration of the soul. You might become, as you say, a dog, or other religions, that type of thing going on. And that another one is, I think a lot of that stuff also puts this idea that human is somehow lesser than spirit. This idea that the soul is spirit. See, even I'm doing it. I'm totally unconscious, isn't it? The soul is spirit. On a podcast, I'm moving my hands up, by the way, if you just listen to this. That the soul is spirit, and that the human is somehow this flawed, thing, if you like. And when you think about living with all those things, it's not great, is it? I mean, if you were to create a system just to really keep people, hemmed in and boxed in and not really experiencing their true power, and freedom, you'd create all those ideas, wouldn't you? I mean, it's quite astounding, really. Yeah. So they're the traditional ideas. We've got ups and downs, you've got lefts and rights, lots of judgment going on, and that type of thing. So the new idea, this is where we're going to get a bit complex, isn't it? I think. I don't know if you're happy to jump in. So the new idea is the multi-dimensional soul. Okay, that doesn't involve any judgment. It doesn't involve ups and downs and hells and heavens. It's a different version, partly because time doesn't exist. So there's no one life, up and down, you die and you up to heaven. That's gone. Things like karma are gone, and judgment is gone. So how would you express the new version I'm going to put you on the spot there.
Well, no, I think I can answer that reasonably well.
Yeah.
Of course, it's an ever-expanding sort of concept for me and knowledge, but I mean, I think number one, I think Seth says that we live in a benevolent universe. Just by existing, we have the right to be, which is an incredibly empowering thing. It's like there's nothing, you can't, in a way, you can't really do anything terribly wrong in that. You're not going to be punished. You're not fatally flawed at the beginning of your life. And that we are all aspects of what he refers to as all that is, which, I mean, for want of a better word, is the closest that you could get to the idea of God. But it's a much different idea of God, because we are all part of all. I mean, the very fact that it's called all that is means that it is all that is, which is everything. And we are an important, every individual is an important part of all that is. And just those simple premises are completely life-changing, because you don't have to justify yourself.
Yes.
You know that you are benevolent, you know, there's a benevolence around you. And not only that, because of what Seth said and his ideas about how reality is, we have the personality, which is living in this physical world. We have the inner self, who is a part of oneself that's one's most connected to, which offers you guidance and is much more connected and is existing in what Seth refers to as framework 2. And then you have what he refers to the entity or the soul, which is a sort of the hub of a wheel, from the point of view that the entity and all it is, well, to start off, all it is trying to expand and is trying to grow, and it's an infinitesimal amount of growth. So that's all it is. The entity is a part of all it is, which is also trying to grow, and the entity is sort of like an overseer, if you see what I mean. And then the inner self is the part that's most connected with the personality. But I think what's important also to know is that the entity or soul is multidimensional, and also there are many aspects of that. So there may be other offshoots of the entity that are living in other time frames, and what would have been referred to in other religions, you know, the more standard traditional religious idea as other lifetimes. But because we're in the place where we're realizing that time is simultaneous, and really there's no linear time, those lifetimes exist in what is known as the spacious present. So there may be a self that exists in Roman times, and there may be a self that lives in 24 AD. There may be another self that lives in the Middle Ages, but because of the non-linear nature of time, they're all happening now. And the entity or the soul is, in a way, sort of the thing that holds those selves all together, and there's a connection. So every self, say the medieval self, learns something, expresses something, that knowledge and that understanding, that experience is incorporated into the whole of that entity and soul, which is incorporated into the greater knowledge of all that is. And there is a wonderful continuous expansion in this benevolent universe.
Yeah, sounds great. Sounds lovely. Yeah, I love the word benevolent. I can't say it, apparently. Benevolent. I mean, another word is a state of grace. And yes. I can't even describe what that, I mean, I can only say from my own kind of out-body experiences and that type of stuff, that a state of grace is certainly how I would describe the sensations, you know, and that type of thing. So yeah, I mean, and so what you described just so different. I picked up on a few bits, so I'll go through those. So if anybody's watching this for the first time, often I'll write things down when Rob's talking and we'll revisit them and that type of thing. But so the first one is that, yeah, state of grace, I think is just so liberating, you know, because a lot of people think that there's something wrong with them, don't they, just as they go through life. And actually to realize that you are, by simply existing, you are in a state of grace. You know, I think that's lovely. In terms of another word for the inner self, I mean, on the hierarchy that you described, now it's not an up hierarchy. It's not kind of like that one's better. I like the word Gestalt, which I think is a German word. Sounds German, doesn't it? Which is part of a whole. So that, you know, that my finger is part of the Gestalt of my body, and that my body is part of the Gestalt of my soul. And I think that's a term for me that works. You know, it's that we are part of this ever expanding consciousness that we call a soul. And I think one of the interesting things, so in the Seth, I remember reading when you were talking, he was talking about a TV station, that if you're watching a TV, and this always humored me anyway, that if one version of you, one portion of you, say, was attending a funeral in 427 or 1925 or whatever, that suddenly on the TV a program might come on about a funeral or something, or you might feel as though somebody's died, but you're not quite sure who has, or something on those. Do you know what I mean? And go, has anyone died recently? You know, that there is this complete, because it's actually one consciousness, you know, it's one energy field, one part of all that is, that it is just constantly communicating with each other in very, very subtle ways, but also not so subtle. You know, it's like if you do sense, I think some people do sense that something bad might happen or something good might happen. It might be that in those terms that another portion in a lifetime is actually having a great day, you know, and you're picking up on the joy of that, and you're, you know, sitting in an office going, I'm not sure why I'm so happy, you know. So I think that's a beautiful thing as well. So yeah, so that's the version of the soul that Seth talks about, and I think it kind of fits with where quantum physics is heading. You know, this multiverse, isn't it? You know, this idea of multiple realities. So yeah, Seth, I think, channeled that in 1967 or something. So well before quantum physics came along in those kind of terms. Is there anything else that you want to add to that?
Just picking up upon something that you said about the intercommunication. I think as you become more comfortable with this concept that I've just talked about, it makes you, well, it made me just wonder about my other selves and wanting to see, you know, if I could communicate with my other selves, or whether they were communicating with me. And I actually went and had a channeled reading with a very good friend of mine, and she was one who was particularly good at picking up on other lifetimes, adjacent lifetimes that were going on at the same time. And there was one that she talked about this botanist character who was left Spain to go to the New World probably in the 16th century. And I'd actually spent quite a bit of time in South America, which was where apparently he had been, or was, you know, in the multidimensional version of it. But one of the things that she said was that he had, you know, he was a botanist, he was collecting seeds, he was you know, an explorer, and he was very interested in that whole thing. And I realized around that time, a few years after I heard about that, I started collecting seeds. I have about 4 acres of land where I live. I started collecting tree seeds on all of my travels around the world. And I started planting these seeds, and the trees started to grow. And now I have a fully fledged Arboretum after 30 years. And I got this wonderful feeling that I was actually fulfilling something that this other self had never been able to fulfill.
Yeah.
And I was looking at I'd in a way brought these trees back, and I'd created this space, this beautiful wood, and that was for me a very good example of how I began to feel a direct connection with another self, and how it enhanced my life. And I you're talking about this good feeling that you had. I got this really great feeling that there was a kind of, oh well, that self didn't seem to manage to do that in that probability, but in a way there had been a communication with me, and I suddenly got fascinated with collecting, because I travel so much, collecting all of these seeds from all around the world. So I thought that's quite a good example of how one's life can be enhanced. And the more you open up, the more you're going to receive information and wisdom from these other selves, and also possibly give to those
the other way on.
The two-way street.
Yeah,
definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's a bit like, funny enough, before we actually started recording, we were talking about seeds, weren't we? We were talking about tomato plants and seeds, and you getting hold of some with Brexit going on and stuff. So I mean, I think if I can articulate it, I think there's such a the old version of the soul is that you are you are a separate individualized person as you go through your life, and then you go through your life, and then you go up and you stay in heaven or wherever for a little bit and come down and that type of thing. And I think the main issue, excuse me, that was my phone going off on a call. And I think the main difference is that there's no separation. So certainly my experience of another life, the most loving experience is actually a future life, because of course, time being simultaneous, we can tune into future lives also. And it's actually an American life with a group who are very self-aware of the fact that they create their own reality, and it's a state of consciousness, and they actually meet by the side of a lake in a domed building. And it's always such a pleasure to tune in to that version. And that's in our terms, about 400 years time. And that's always good. And then another one I had was actually the most dramatic, or the most different to me being a bit of a tree hugger, into love and light and all that kind of stuff, is actually the experience of another life as an American soldier in the Civil War, that are very happily kill as many of the enemy as possible, and actually tuning into that was just, to me, so alien, but I learned something different about the mind, and maybe he did, and this type of thing. So I think just the interplay is one of the big differences between them. And I think you mentioned last time that one thing that you do is that, I think you mentioned on the video, that you would send information forward and back to other probable selves, if you like. And I think that that's essentially what's happening here. So other lifetimes are essentially other probable selves, other versions, if you like, of the self. So one can also send information and receive information in exactly the same way. So there's no real barriers to that. And I think that could be a real exploration in itself, if one had the time and the inclination.
Yes, well, I mean, actually, at the moment, I'm writing what I would call a sort of straight autobiography, which is just a story about this probability, this fairly fixed probability that I'm in at the moment. But I'm also writing I'm going to call it fiction, but I mean, it isn't really fiction to me, and it is about several other lifetimes, and about what happened in those lifetimes. But there is a component which is unfolding as I'm writing, when I realize that there is a character who is in all of these stories, who is my sort of greater self come guide, who is trying to help these other selves, some of whom are quite aware and some of whom aren't. And as I'm writing about it, I mean, when I write, it's almost like I just pick up on that particular lifetime and that particular probability and write about that, and I can feel those personalities so different from me, but also so connected. So I think there's automatic writing, for example,
Yes.
just tuning in, and also I would say if you can develop first of all dream recall, but also the ability to lucid dream, you can quite often find yourself in other times and places and possibly communicating with other aspects of yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, go on. Sorry, you were going to say something
Well,
else.
I was just going to say, I mean, according to Seth, not only do we have selves, which are all part of this greater entity that exist in other times and places, but we also have, even upon this earth at this time, what he refers to as counterparts, who are sort of fragments of this entity or soul that are actually experiencing another part of physical reality, but in the same time frame.
Yeah.
And,
So they're probable. So like a lifetime is another lifetime is a probable version of your soul in a different time context, whereas a counterpart, and I think that's where this idea of soulmate maybe kind of drifts in and out. People, in those terms, that a portion of your consciousness, your personality exists in the same time frame, and therefore one is having various experiences within the same time frame. So one might be like, I'm in Hitchin, in the UK, somebody else might be in France, somebody else might, but we're all part of the same consciousness, the same soul consciousness. Yeah, I mean, and then each of those has got their own probabilities. I mean, it's just it's so mind-blowing, you can't actually get your head around it.
yes, but I think, I mean, when I initially discovered about this concept, which made absolute sense to me, it did take a bit of time to kind of think about it and to kind of wonder about whether I mean, I think the imagination is very important here, because it links you in with these other probabilities. And I think if you're in any way creative, you're going to have what is referred to as bleed throughs. You're going to, feel a feeling that doesn't seem to be completely you, but it's sort of vaguely familiar. I think Seth talks about it in one book. He says something like, you may get this desire to pick up a violin, and you've never played the violin, and yet you're able to play it reasonably well, considering you've had no. I find this particularly with other languages. I know that there are other aspects that have lived in Spain, and my love of Spain and my friends there, and my fairly reasonable ability to speak Spanish, I know comes from and is coming from other aspects of my greater self who've lived in that time in Spain.
Yeah.
So,
and another version of that is you could might be that one's likes and dislikes. So I think in one thing, exploring this idea of what's in your house, what images do you have? What's the, if you like the Egyptian stuff or African stuff, whatever, that's a nod, if you like, to another lifetime, maybe, that you're another probable you that's having. And also proteges as well. There's something on the internet, this child that is about 4, and is playing stuff and making stuff up that everyone's absolutely astonished by, and that is another example where, obviously, in another probability, there's an accomplished pianist, and that this counterpart is other version of the soul is so strongly connected. As you say, maybe there's unfinished business, if you like, in the pianist life, and they want to finish that off, and so they incorporate that skill in another life that we would call something like a protege or something. So, yeah, it's kind of fascinating, isn't it? Yeah. So lucid dreams, any thoughts on, if we get into the practical applications of all this kind of stuff, so lucid dreams, any ideas? I mean, for me, it's often just about saying that before I go to sleep, that, I'm inviting a lucid dream, and that seems to work pretty well as well. What about yourself?
Yes, I mean, I think, this thing about giving ourselves positive suggestions or, expansive suggestions, it can go to all parts of our lives. So it can be about the waking reality, but it also be about, the dream reality, which is an incredibly unexplored for most people system of reality, and a system of reality where you step out of linear time, and you have a great opportunity to meet other aspects of yourself, communicate with other aspects of yourself. And of course, if you're lucid when this happens, then you can actually be much more of a conscious co-creator within that dream state. Because after all, you are creating that dream in the same way as you're creating your physical reality in daily life. So suggestions before sleep that you will effortlessly and easily remember your dreams, that you will become awake, lucid in dreams. There's various techniques like, when you're in a dream and you become to clap or to do something that is the trigger that wakes you up within the dream.
That's the one that worked for me, that I would use, which is the clapping.
Okay.
I've been in many dreams where I've stood. I remember particularly the one with the Civil War soldiers. So I was in an encampment, smelling all the dust and the heat under my feet and all that kind of stuff in the uniform. And I said there was somebody standing here, and I said, hold on a second, I've got to clap. And so the soldier clapped 3 times, 1, 2, 3. My consciousness went fully into, or as much as I would say fully into, his consciousness, and he felt like he was moved back a little bit. And then I was able to wander around and have such a dynamically amazing life, real experience. And that was but that was with clapping. Yeah, that was amazing. Yeah.
And I mean, practically, you've got the access during dreams, but you've also got what Seth refers to as psi time, which is not meditation, but it's just basically doing an exercise where you close down the external senses and open up the internal senses. And that's when you can, and I think, easily communicate with other aspects of yourself, because there's this whole other, we're so most of the time focused out sort of externally when we're in physical reality, but there are a lot of techniques, and it's not really meditation. It's more just closing down the external senses, being very quiet, and then just listening and seeing what's in. And it is quite amazing what will happen. I mean, I haven't been doing it as often as I used to, but I mean, I was doing it the other day, and a whole section of the next part of this book I'm writing came to me. I actually saw a whole event. I saw this other self standing by a fireplace, leaning on the fire. I could feel the fire, on his body, warming him. And I really felt that person. And he's a very interesting person. I don't know what he's doing yet. I know he's on a journey, something about he's going to collect this orphaned child, but he's he's very different from me, but he's also, there's some sort of similarities. He loves trees and all the rest of it. So just having access to this other self is very uplifting, and it opens up doors that wouldn't have been opened up before.
Yeah, it's definitely not that unique experience that you've had, but my experience of similar things. So when you say psi time, it's actually called, if you're listening or whatever, it's called psychological time.
Yes,
it's the full thing. So you can actually, if you're on Google, obviously you can type in psychological time, Seth, or Jane Roberts psychological time, and that's really cool. The strange enough, I just did a video last night to open up the inner senses and do that. So I will link that below this video as well, because I was asked of it in one of the group that I was ringing. But I also feel I get the sense of such security. It's almost like you're not alone, and you can get a sense of it, and all these different aspects of oneself have the same essence and flavor, even though they will be male, because obviously some of these are male and or female. Some are old, some are young, you know, when they're tuned into and that type of thing. And I do feel as though it's there's such a good feeling and such a strength kind of that comes from the inner senses when you can tune into these other portions of yourself, and they're incredibly welcoming. It's quite strange, my experience of it. You know, it's that if you're tuned into a version of yourself that can somehow sense you, if you like, the sense of welcoming is that I've experienced has also been lovely. You know, certainly that future self in the States in about 400 years time, it's like going on holiday. You know, I always come back feeling absolutely lovely, you know, and more connected to myself whenever I do it. So yeah, fascinating stuff. So there's so much to explore. And I think practically speaking, if there's something, if one is drawn to a particular lifetime, so you say Spain, so Claire, my partner, loves the desert and that type of thing. Strangely, a bit like yourself, she was in Spain and picked up the language incredibly easily when she was there, in a way that people are going, oh, you know, are you Spanish? You go, no, I've only been here for a couple of weeks, but you know, it just seems to click with her. But so I'd say if you're watching this and if you're interested in a particular geography, or I suppose people that do reenactments are a more extreme version of it, that type of thing. But if you're drawn to a particular time period, go into psychological time, with the intention maybe to meet and explore, or you can click the video and get through to that meditation, that psychic journey, and then see how you get on and start with something that's obvious. I think that would be my advice, and that also in dreams as well. So you've got dreams, psi time, start with something that's obvious. Anything else?
Listen to your intuition. You know, if you get a sort of hunch, or if you get a feeling, just notice it. I mean, you don't necessarily have to act on it,
No.
but I think it's very important to pay attention to these sort of nudgings and urgings, because inevitably they're coming from your inner self, or possibly other selves, and there may be something very important. I mean, I find myself, I often just sit down and just do some writing. You know, just let the words come through, and sometimes it can be a very interesting perspective on a situation that might be giving you trouble, or something you just want to get some guidance on, basically.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I think the main thing is just to open up, to allow yourself to entertain the possibility that there's much more going on than you realize, and to realize, yet again, as I said at the beginning, we live in a benevolent universe, so there's nothing awful happening. You live in a safe and benevolent universe. Therefore, anything that you receive is going to be beneficial, not only to you, maybe to others, and possibly, you know, there's this interchange, and just be playful and experiment with it. I think that would be my advice.
Cool. I would also add, having worked with a lot of healers and spiritual people in psychic awareness and clients, that you don't need to protect yourself or anything. If you haven't heard about that, forget I even mentioned it. But you don't need to do any of that kind of stuff at all. You're quite safe to go and explore and play. And if you can relax and do that, dreams, intuition. And I would also add, based on that, is sometimes if one is so focused in physical reality, kind of too much, if you like, you're too enamored with it, in that, you know, it's that you close yourself off to these other messages, those intuitive messages. So maybe if you can just kind of step back a little bit from it, go, okay, there's more coming on, there's more going on here. I'm not going to get so involved, you know, with physical life, you know, for a little while. I'm just going to pull back a little bit. And sometimes that creates a nice gap for other information to come in. So cool. Well, I think we're done. What we're on now, about 40 minutes. So that's about right. Cool. So anything to round off at all, Rob, on this rather complex conversation?
Well, I think, as always, you know, the Seth books are always very important. Remember those the first two books, but then there are other books as well, which are very helpful because it actually explains it in another way. And just realize that you are, you know, that this is a journey of exploration, and you know, it's about enhancing your life. It's about opening yourself up to other possibilities that can give you more joy and give you more a sense of belonging and completeness, you know. And I think anything that makes you feel good is a clue. It's a clue, you know.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We'll end it there. So if you enjoyed that, thank you, Rob, for that. Another cool conversation. We'll do another one next time, decide on the subject. But if you like this, if you're on the podcast, we hope you enjoy it. If you're on YouTube, please like the channel, hit the bell, links below to various other conversations and things, and we'll see you in the next video. So thanks for watching and listening, and have a great day. Take care.